I stood outside Lakewood Country Club gripping a sealed envelope that contained enough evidence to obliterate my brother's perfect reputation forever. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched Trevor commanding the room like he always did, gesturing wildly as he told another fabricated story about his success. 10 years ago, this golden boy had stolen my $43,000 college fund and convinced our entire family I was a gambling addict. Tonight, at our father's retirement party, I would finally reveal the truth I'd spent a decade uncovering. The envelope felt heavy in my hands as laughter echoed from inside, knowing that in exactly 5 minutes, Trevor's world would crumble into nothing. Walking into that Wells Fargo branch on March 15, 2014, I expected to withdraw $3,000 for spring semester textbooks. Instead, the teller's sympathetic expression told me everything before she even spoke those devastating words. "I'm sorry, Horace, but your account shows a zero balance." My hands trembled as she printed the statement. Transaction after transaction, all authorized by someone with access to my account. Someone I trusted completely. My older brother Trevor had systematically drained every penny over 6 months, making withdrawals that perfectly coincided with his expensive dinner's designer clothes and weekend trips to Las Vegas with his fraternity brothers. The drive home felt like traveling through molasses. Trevor's silver BMW sat in our driveway, gleaming under the afternoon sun like a monument to his lies. I found him in our father's study, hunched over financial documents with the concentrated expression he wore when manipulating numbers. "We need to talk," I said, placing the bank statement on the mahogany desk between us. Trevor glanced at the paper, and for one brief moment, his mask slipped. I saw panic flash across his green eyes before he recovered, transforming instantly into the concerned older brother persona he'd perfected over 22 years. "Horace, buddy, sit down. I've been meaning to have this conversation with you." His voice carried that patronizing tone he'd used since childhood whenever he wanted to make me feel small. "I know about the gambling." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What gambling, Trevor? You stole my money, every cent I saved working at the grocery store for 3 years. He opened a manila folder with theatrical precision, spreading documents across the desk like a lawyer presenting evidence. Betting slips with my forged signature. Withdrawal records that somehow showed my fingerprints. Bank statements that had been doctored to make my legitimate withdrawals look like cash advances for poker games. "I've been trying to help you, little brother. Dad doesn't know how bad it's gotten." Trevor's performance was flawless, his voice heavy with manufactured concern. "You've been stealing from your own college fund to feed this addiction. I tried to stop the bleeding, but $25,000 disappeared before I could intervene." My mind reeled. $25,000 was the exact amount Trevor had spent on his new Rolex, his spring break trip to Cancun, and the down payment on that BMW. He'd planned this character assassination with surgical precision. "You're lying?" I whispered. But even as the words left my mouth, I realized how perfectly he'd constructed this web. Who would believe the younger brother over Trevor, the honor roll student who'd been helping manage family finances while our father recovered from emergency heart surgery? The sound of footsteps on hardwood announced our parents' arrival. Margaret, my mother, swept into the room with her usual dramatic flair, followed by Frank, my father, still moving carefully after his cardiac procedure. Trevor had orchestrated this confrontation with the same meticulous planning he'd used to steal my future. "Is he wild? Son, we need to discuss your problem," Frank said, his voice carrying the weight of disappointment I'd never heard directed at me before. Trevor launched into his rehearsed speech about discovering my supposed gambling addiction, how he'd tried to protect the family from scandal, how he'd liquidated my college fund to pay off dangerous bookmakers who'd been threatening me. Every lie rolled off his tongue with practiced sincerity. Margaret sobbed dramatically, clutching her pearl necklace, as if my alleged sins had personally wounded her. How could you do this to our family, Horace? After everything we've sacrificed for your education? I tried explaining the truth, showing them evidence of Trevor's actual spending, but he'd anticipated every argument. For every piece of evidence I presented, he had a counter-narrative that painted me as a desperate addict, trying to frame his innocent brother. The final blow came when Sarah, my girlfriend of 2 years, arrived for what I thought would be a supportive dinner. Trevor had already poisoned that well too, showing her photographs of me supposedly leaving underground poker games, bank records of my gambling debts, and testimonials from his fraternity brothers who swore they'd seen me betting recklessly at campus events. Sarah's tearful breakup speech felt surreal. She'd believed every fabrication without giving me a chance to defend myself. I can't be with someone who lies about everything, Horace. Get help, please. For your own sake. As she walked out of our dining room, Trevor placed a concerned hand on my shoulder with theatrical gentleness. The family has discussed this, buddy. We think residential treatment would be best. There's a facility in Arizona that specializes in gambling addiction recovery. The ultimatum was clear: admit to crimes I'd never committed and enter rehabilitation, or leave the house immediately. Looking around that table at the faces of people who'd raised me, loved me, and now believed I was a pathological liar and thief, I realized Trevor had won completely. I packed my belongings that night while Trevor offered hollow words of encouragement about recovery and redemption. As I loaded my beat-up Honda Civic with everything I owned, he pressed a business card into my palm. Call me when you're ready to take responsibility, Horace. The family will be here when you're healthy again. Driving away from the only home I'd ever known, I caught a glimpse of Trevor in my rearview mirror. He was standing in our doorway watching me leave with an expression of pure satisfaction. He'd destroyed my reputation, stolen my future, and convinced everyone I loved that I was the villain. But Trevor had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated how far I would go to prove my innocence and reclaim everything he'd taken from me. The studio apartment on Maple Street cost $450 monthly, leaving me exactly $73 for food after my first month's rent and security deposit. The previous tenant had left behind a broken microwave and a mattress that smelled like cigarettes and regret. Lying on that stained fabric at night, I listened to mice scurrying through the walls and planned my comeback. Marcus Williams, my supervisor at Consolidated Freight Solutions, took one look at my college transcripts and immediately knew I was overqualified for warehouse work. This 58-year-old veteran had started loading trucks after returning from Desert Storm and worked his way up to managing 200 employees across 3 shifts. Most college boys don't last a week throwing boxes, he said during my first lunch break, watching me unwrap a peanut butter sandwich I'd made from day-old bread. You got staying power, though, something driving you besides rent money. Marcus became my unexpected mentor, teaching me logistics principles while we reorganized inventory systems. During our late-night conversations, I shared pieces of my story without revealing the full extent of Trevor's betrayal. Marcus understood family disappointment in ways that went beyond mere sympathy. "Why, my brother came back from Vietnam different," he told me one evening as we locked up the warehouse. Drugs, gambling, stealing from everyone who tried to help him. Sometimes family members become your worst enemies, but that doesn't mean you stop fighting for what's right. Meanwhile, Trevor's life continued its upward trajectory like a rocket fueled by my stolen dreams. His social media posts showcased graduation parties, job interviews with prestigious accounting firms, and romantic dinners with sorority presidents. Every photograph felt like a knife twist, but I studied them for clues about his spending patterns and lifestyle choices. 3 months into my exile, salvation arrived in an unexpected form. Dorothy, my 86-year-old grandmother, appeared at my apartment door carrying a casserole dish and wearing the determined expression that had intimidated family members for 6 decades. This place smells like despair and cleaning products," she announced, pushing past me into the tiny living space. "We need to talk about your brother's nonsense." Dorothy had always been the sharpest person in our family, managing her late husband's construction business for 40 years while raising 5 children. She placed the casserole on my salvaged coffee table and sat down with the careful precision of someone whose bones had earned their brittleness. "I never believed Trevor's gambling story," she said without preamble. "That boy's been a liar since he could walk, and he's gotten too comfortable thinking everyone else is stupid." My throat tightened with the first hope I'd felt in months. "Grandma, I never gambled. I never stole anything. Trevor took my college money and made everyone think I was the thief." She patted my hand with fingers that felt like warm paper. "I know, sweetheart. I've been watching that little snake spend money he couldn't possibly earn from part-time work. Rolex watches don't buy themselves on student wages." Dorothy reached into her massive purse and withdrew a manila envelope thick with documents. "Your grandfather set up safety deposit boxes for all his grandchildren. Yours contained copies of every bank transaction, every deposit, every withdrawal, since you opened that account at 16. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Page after page of evidence that would prove my innocence. Transaction records showing legitimate deposits from my grocery store paychecks. Withdrawal patterns that corresponded exactly with school expenses, not gambling losses. Most importantly, records of account access that would demonstrate when Trevor had used his emergency authorization to steal my money. "Why didn't you show this to my parents?" I asked, hope and confusion battling in my chest. Dorothy's expression hardened. "Because I went to the bank last week to retrieve these documents. The safety deposit box had been cleaned out. Trevor got there first, somehow convinced them he needed those papers for legal purposes related to your gambling debts." The hope deflated like a punctured balloon, but Dorothy wasn't finished. "However, that boy made the same mistake all criminals make. He assumed he was the smartest person in the room." She produced a second, smaller envelope. "I've been keeping my own financial records for 70 years. Every birthday check, every Christmas gift, every penny I ever gave you or your brother, plus photocopies of suspicious transactions I noticed on family account statements." These documents told a different story entirely. Dorothy had been secretly tracking Trevor's spending patterns, documenting purchases that exceeded his declared income recording conversations, where he'd contradicted his own stories about money management. She'd even photographed him leaving expensive restaurants and high-end stores during times when he claimed to be studying for finals. "I may be old Horace, but I'm not blind. That boy's been stealing from family accounts for years, not just yours. He's gotten sloppy because everyone believes his golden boy act." She stood up with effort, smoothing her dress with dignity that seemed inherited from another era. "I can't undo what your parents believe right now, but I can give you tools to fight back. Don't waste this opportunity on anger. Channel it into something productive." After Dorothy left, I spread her evidence across my tiny kitchen table and began planning. Trevor had won the first battle through superior preparation and family manipulation, but he'd made crucial errors that someone with patience could exploit. Over the following weeks, Marcus noticed my renewed focus at work. I started volunteering for overtime shifts, saving every possible penny while studying logistics management during break periods. Dorothy's evidence had given me hope, but building a case would require resources I didn't currently possess. "You know, Horace," Marcus said one Friday evening as we finished inventory reports, "I've been thinking about starting my own moving company. These big corporations don't care about customer service anymore. A small operation that actually gave a damn could make serious money in this market." The seed of an idea took root. Moving companies required trucks, insurance licensing, and startup capital, but they also offered something invaluable: cash flow and flexible scheduling that would allow me to continue investigating Trevor's crimes. "What would something like that cost to launch?" I asked, trying to keep the excitement from my voice. Marcus pulled out a worn notebook filled with calculations he'd apparently been working on for months. About $15,000 for a used truck, another $5,000 for insurance and licensing, maybe $3,000 for equipment and marketing. Could start small, build reputation gradually. $23,000 seemed impossible on my warehouse salary, but Dorothy's evidence suggested Trevor had stolen far more than my college fund. If I could prove his thefts extended beyond my account, the resulting lawsuit might provide exactly the capital I needed. That night, I called Jake Morrison, Trevor's former college roommate who'd graduated 6 months earlier. Jake had always seemed uncomfortable during Trevor's more elaborate spending sprees, and I suspected he might have witnessed something useful. "Horace, dude, I heard about your gambling thing. That's rough, man." Jake's voice carried genuine sympathy mixed with awkward uncertainty. "Jake, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to think carefully before answering. Did you ever see Trevor doing anything with bank documents or financial papers that seemed unusual?" Long pause. Background noise suggested Jake was at a bar or restaurant. "Why are you asking?" Trevor said you were getting help for your addiction. "Because Trevor's been lying about everything, and I think you might have seen evidence that could prove it." Another pause, longer this time. When Jake spoke again, his voice had dropped to a whisper. "Meet me tomorrow at that coffee shop on University Boulevard, 2 o'clock. Come alone and don't tell anyone we're talking." As I hung up the phone, I realized Trevor's perfectly constructed lies were about to encounter their first serious challenge. My brother had always been skilled at manipulation, but he'd never learned the most important lesson our grandfather had tried to teach us. The truth has a way of surviving even when buried under layers of deception. Jake Morrison looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as he hunched over a coffee cup, glancing nervously at every customer who entered Brewster's Cafe. When I slid into the booth across from him, he immediately leaned forward with the urgency of someone carrying a heavy secret. "I should have spoken up months ago," he whispered, pulling a manila folder from his backpack. "Trevor made me promise never to tell anyone, but what he did to you is eating me alive." The documents Jake produced made my stomach drop. Bank statements from accounts I'd never seen before, credit card applications with forged signatures, and photographs Jake had secretly taken with his phone, showing Trevor at underground poker games in downtown Las Vegas. He wasn't lying about gambling, Horace. He was lying about who was doing it. Jake's hands trembled as he sorted through the evidence. Trevor lost $37,000 in 6 months playing high-stakes games. When the bookmakers started threatening him, he panicked and stole your college money to pay them off. The photographs showed Trevor at card tables, throwing around cash like confetti, surrounded by the kind of dangerous-looking men who don't negotiate payment plans. Timestamps on the images corresponded exactly with the dates money disappeared from my account. "Why didn't you stop him?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice level. Jake's face crumpled with guilt. "He promised he would tell your parents the truth after graduation. Said he just needed time to figure out how to pay you back. Then when you confronted him, he completely flipped the script and blamed everything on you." But Jake's evidence represented only part of Trevor's criminal enterprise. Over the next hour, he revealed a systematic pattern of fraud that extended far beyond my stolen college fund. Trevor had been skimming money from the family construction business while our father recovered from surgery, forging checks from elderly clients, and even stealing cash from church collection plates during youth group activities. The worst part, Jake continued producing his final piece of evidence, is that he bragged about how easy it was to fool everyone. Said you were the perfect scapegoat because you'd always been the quiet, trustworthy brother. No one would suspect the honor student of being a criminal mastermind. That phrase hit me like a physical blow. Trevor hadn't just stolen my money, he'd weaponized my own reputation for honesty against me, knowing that everyone would believe his accusations because I'd never given anyone reason to doubt my character. I left the coffee shop with Jake's evidence and a burning determination to expose every lie Trevor had constructed. But evidence without resources meant nothing, so I threw myself into Marcus's moving company idea with single-minded focus. Within 2 weeks, we'd formed William Sterling Moving Solutions, named for Marcus's military background and my grandfather's middle name. Dorothy surprised us by investing $5,000 from her retirement savings, becoming our silent partner and official business advisor. I didn't survive the Great Depression and six decades of marriage by being cautious, she explained while signing incorporation papers. Sometimes you have to risk everything to get justice. Our first truck was a beaten-up Ford with 200,000 miles and a temperamental transmission, but Marcus's mechanical skills kept it running while I learned the logistics of small business management. We started with local moves, charging competitive rates while providing the kind of personal service that corporate companies had abandoned. Linda Chen became our first major client purely by accident. She'd hired a national moving company to relocate her household after a difficult divorce. But they'd canceled at the last minute, leaving her stranded with a house full of packed boxes and a new job starting Monday morning. "I'll pay double your normal rate if you can move everything this weekend," she said, when Marcus answered our emergency hotline. "I'm desperate." Linda turned out to be a 32-year-old elementary school teacher with twin daughters and the kind of quiet strength that emerges from surviving personal disasters. Her ex-husband had cleaned out their joint accounts and disappeared, leaving her to rebuild from nothing with 2 7-year-old girls depending on her stability. Working that weekend move, I discovered Linda possessed an intuitive understanding of organizational systems that complemented my analytical approach to problem solving. She suggested routing improvements that saved us 45 minutes of drive time and equipment configurations that increased our truck capacity by 20%. "You should consider expanding into corporate relocations," she mentioned while we loaded her kitchen appliances. "My school district moves teachers between buildings every summer. They always complain about the current contractors being unreliable and overpriced." That conversation led to our first major contract, relocating 67 teachers and staff members for Riverside School District. The job paid $28,000 and established our reputation in the education sector. But more importantly, it connected me with Patricia Walsh, the district's chief financial officer. Patricia had 23 years of experience investigating financial irregularities, having caught embezzlement schemes that totaled over $2 million during her career. When I casually mentioned my situation during lunch break, her expression immediately sharpened with professional interest. "Financial fraud involving family members is unfortunately common," she said, reviewing Jake's evidence with practiced eyes. "Your brother made several critical errors that someone with forensic accounting experience could exploit." Patricia introduced me to David Rodriguez, a private investigator who specialized in white-collar crime. David had left the FBI after 15 years to start his own practice focusing on cases involving corporate theft and family financial abuse. "Pro bono cases keep my conscience clear," David explained during our first meeting. "Your brother's pattern suggests he's escalated beyond family theft into larger criminal enterprises. Men like Trevor don't stop stealing just because they've successfully framed someone else." David's initial investigation confirmed my worst suspicions. Trevor had parlayed his success at deceiving our family into a position at Hartwell Morrison and Associates, a prestigious accounting firm specializing in estate planning and wealth management. His job provided access to client accounts containing millions of dollars, along with the trust of elderly investors who believed his carefully cultivated reputation for integrity. "He's been skimming small amounts from multiple accounts," David reported after 3 weeks of surveillance. "Never enough to trigger automatic alerts, always from clients who don't actively monitor their statements. It's sophisticated fraud that probably took months to plan." The evidence was damning, but incomplete. David needed more time to document Trevor's crimes thoroughly enough to guarantee criminal prosecution. Meanwhile, Trevor continued climbing the social ladder, announcing his engagement to Jessica Hartwell, daughter of Judge William Hartwell and heiress to the law firm's reputation. "Your brother's getting married into judicial aristocracy," David observed while showing me surveillance photographs of Trevor's engagement party. "If we're going to expose him, it needs to happen before those family connections become legally cemented." As Williams Sterling Moving Solutions expanded into a 20-truck operation with 42 employees, I maintained careful secrecy about our financial success. Dorothy's advice about patience was proving prophetic. Trevor's arrogance was making him increasingly careless, while my legitimate business empire grew stronger every month. Linda had become our operations manager, bringing organizational skills that transformed chaos into efficiency. Her daughters treated our warehouse like their personal playground, and watching them laugh while playing among the moving equipment reminded me daily why family relationships mattered more than financial success. "You never talk about your parents?" Linda mentioned one evening while we reviewed quarterly reports. "Are you close with your family?" The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't ready to cross. Linda knew pieces of my story, but revealing the full extent of Trevor's betrayal felt like admitting weakness I couldn't afford to show. "It's complicated," I said, focusing on spreadsheets instead of her concerned expression. "Sometimes family members disappoint you in ways that can't be easily forgiven." She nodded, with the understanding that comes from personal experience with family betrayal. "When you're ready to talk about it, I'm here. Sometimes sharing the burden makes it easier to carry." That night, reviewing David's latest surveillance reports, I realized Trevor's wedding represented both opportunity and deadline. Judge Hartwell's family commanded enormous respect throughout the state's legal community. Once Trevor married into that dynasty, exposing his crimes would become significantly more difficult. But Trevor's arrogance was also creating opportunities. His increasingly lavish lifestyle was drawing attention from colleagues who questioned how a junior associate could afford cars, vacations, and jewelry that exceeded his stated income. Several clients had expressed subtle concerns about missing money, though none had filed formal complaints. "He's setting himself up for a spectacular fall," David concluded during our monthly strategy session. "The question is whether we wait for him to destroy himself naturally or accelerate the process through strategic revelation." Looking at the evidence we'd accumulated over 18 months of investigation, I realized we possessed enough information to send Trevor to prison for decades. But Dorothy's wisdom echoed in my memory. Patience often yields better results than immediate action. Trevor had stolen my college fund, destroyed my family relationships, and built his success on a foundation of lies and theft. Soon he would discover that some debts can't be erased through manipulation and charm. The reckoning was coming, and this time I would control every detail of its timing and execution. 5 years after leaving my family home with nothing but a broken heart and 2 suitcases, Williams Sterling Moving Solutions had become the dominant logistics company in 3 states. Our fleet of 67 trucks transported everything from college dormitory furniture to corporate office relocations, generating annual revenues that exceeded $2.4 million. Linda and I had married in a small ceremony at Dorothy's house, surrounded by our chosen family of employees, clients, and the grandmother who'd never stopped believing in my innocence. Linda's daughters, now 12 years old, called me dad without prompting, and their unconditional acceptance had healed wounds I didn't realize still bled. Meanwhile, Trevor's life appeared to be reaching its own pinnacle of success. His social media presence showcased a carefully curated existence of professional accomplishments, romantic milestones, and material acquisitions that suggested unlimited prosperity. He'd been promoted to senior associate at Hartwell Morrison and Associates, earned recognition from the state's accounting board, and planned an elaborate wedding to Jessica Hartwell that would cement his position among the region's legal elite. But David Rodriguez's continued surveillance revealed a different reality hidden beneath Trevor's polished exterior. My brother's gambling addiction had never disappeared. It had simply evolved into more sophisticated forms of risk-taking that now included stock market speculation, cryptocurrency investments, and underground poker games, with stakes that exceeded his legitimate income by thousands of dollars each month. He's stealing at a rate of approximately $15,000 monthly from client accounts. David reported during one of our regular breakfast meetings at Dorothy's house. The firm's partners haven't detected the theft because Trevor's been careful to target accounts belonging to elderly clients who rarely monitor their statements. Dorothy, now 91, but still sharp enough to balance her checkbook to the penny, listened to these reports with the focused attention of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human weakness during 9 decades of life. "The boy's gotten too comfortable," she observed while refilling our coffee cups. "Success makes criminals careless, and Trevor's been successful for too long to remember what consequences feel like." The evidence David had compiled would have been sufficient to prosecute Trevor years earlier, but we deliberately waited for his crimes to reach levels that would guarantee significant prison time. Federal embezzlement charges involving elderly victims carried mandatory minimum sentences that couldn't be reduced through plea bargaining or family connections. Patricia Walsh continued providing forensic accounting expertise that helped us understand the full scope of Trevor's financial crimes. Her analysis suggested that Trevor had stolen over $350,000 during his 5-year employment at the law firm using techniques that demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of regulatory oversight and audit procedures. "Your brother's not just stealing money," Patricia explained while reviewing the latest documentation. "He's stealing retirement savings from people who trusted him with their financial security. Some of these clients are losing money they'll never be able to replace." That revelation transformed my motivation from personal revenge into something deeper and more meaningful. Trevor wasn't just the brother who'd destroyed my young adult life. He was a predator who targeted vulnerable, elderly people for systematic financial abuse. Robert Chen, Linda's brother-in-law and our corporate attorney, had been helping us prepare legal strategies for eventually exposing Trevor's crimes. His law firm specialized in whistleblower protection and white-collar crime prosecution, providing expertise that complemented David's investigative skills. "Timing will be crucial," Robert advised during a strategy session in our conference room. "We need to coordinate revelation with federal authorities to ensure Trevor faces the maximum possible consequences. If we act too early, he might negotiate plea bargains that minimize his punishment." The perfect timing opportunity presented itself when Trevor announced his engagement party would occur during the same weekend as our father's mandatory retirement celebration. Frank Sterling had managed Sterling Construction for 38 years, building a reputation for integrity and craftsmanship that employed over 200 workers and their families. His retirement party was scheduled to include business partners, longtime employees, family friends, and political figures who'd supported his company throughout decades of community involvement. Trevor's decision to schedule his engagement announcement for the same weekend struck me as the ultimate expression of his narcissistic personality. He couldn't bear sharing attention with anyone, even our father, during a milestone celebration that honored 4 decades of honest work. He's planning to upstage Dad's retirement party with his own engagement announcement. I told Linda while we discussed travel arrangements for attending the combined celebrations. It's the same selfish behavior that's defined Trevor's entire life. Linda had never met my family, though she'd heard enough stories to understand the complex dynamics that had shaped my relationship with parents who still believed I'd stolen money and developed gambling addictions. Her presence at the party would represent my first attempt at family reconciliation, but it would also provide emotional support during what promised to be an emotionally challenging confrontation. "Are you sure you want to do this publicly?" she asked while we reviewed David's evidence files one final time. "Exposing Trevor at your father's retirement party will create a scene that becomes part of Dad's memory of that day forever." The question forced me to examine my motivations carefully. Part of me wanted the dramatic satisfaction of destroying Trevor's reputation in front of everyone who'd believed his lies. But another part recognized that true justice required focusing on his victims rather than my personal need for vindication. Trevor chose the timing by scheduling his engagement party during Dad's celebration. I decided, if he wants to make that weekend about himself, then he can deal with the consequences of having his crimes exposed during his moment of supposed triumph. Amanda Fletcher, a family friend who'd known me since childhood, had reached out several times over the years to express quiet doubts about Trevor's gambling story. Her father had worked construction alongside Frank for 25 years, and she'd witnessed enough family dynamics to recognize when something didn't feel genuine. "I never believed you were stealing money," Amanda confessed during a phone conversation while I planned the party revelation. Trevor's always been the type of person who makes you count your fingers after shaking hands with him. Her support, along with similar expressions of doubt from Thomas Peterson, my high school mathematics teacher, and Helen Morris, Trevor's current secretary at the law firm, suggested that Trevor's reputation wasn't as bulletproof as he'd assumed. Helen had contacted David directly after noticing financial irregularities that troubled her enough to seek outside advice. Her access to Trevor's office files and appointment schedules provided corroborating evidence that strengthened our case considerably. "Mr. Trevor's been acting nervous lately," Helen reported during a clandestine meeting at a restaurant outside the city. "He's been coming to work early and staying late shredding documents that should probably be kept for client records." This behavioral change suggested that Trevor might have detected signs of investigation or audit activity that threatened his criminal enterprise. David's sources within the FBI indicated that Hartwell Morrison and Associates was being examined as part of a broader investigation into elder financial abuse, though Trevor apparently remained unaware of federal scrutiny. If your brother knows he's under investigation, he might accelerate his criminal activity to steal as much as possible before getting caught, Robert warned during our final planning meeting. "We need to move quickly to prevent additional victims." The decision crystallized, that is, with perfect clarity. Trevor's engagement party would become the stage for revealing 5 years' worth of evidence that would send him to federal prison and provide restitution for the elderly clients he'd been systematically robbing. Justice delayed is justice denied, but sometimes patience creates opportunities for more complete justice than immediate action could achieve. Trevor had spent 5 years believing he'd successfully destroyed my life and escaped consequences for his crimes. He was about to discover that some debts accrue interest over time, and the bill was finally coming due. 3 weeks before the retirement party, Trevor's paranoia reached levels that bordered on desperation. Helen Morris called David with reports that my brother had been working 18-hour days, systematically shredding client files and transferring funds between accounts with the frantic energy of someone who sensed approaching disaster. "Mr. Trevor's been asking strange questions about office security procedures," Helen reported during a secret meeting at a truck stop outside city limits. "Yesterday, he wanted to know if anyone had keys to his filing cabinets and whether the building's surveillance cameras record after-hours activity." David's federal contacts confirmed that an FBI task force investigating elder financial abuse was preparing warrants that would freeze assets and seize records from Hartwell Morrison and Associates within 48 hours. Trevor's accelerated document destruction represented desperate attempts to eliminate evidence, but digital financial records had already been copied through court-authorized surveillance. "Your brother's about to be arrested regardless of whether you expose him at the party," David explained while we finalized logistics for the weekend confrontation. "The question becomes whether you want to control the narrative or let federal agents handle revelation." Robert Chen had prepared a comprehensive legal package that included civil lawsuit documentation, victim impact statements, and restitution calculations totaling over $400,000 in stolen funds, plus interest and penalties. Our evidence was organized chronologically, cross-referenced with witness testimony, and formatted for maximum impact during public presentation. Everything's bulletproof, Robert confirmed while reviewing the final documents. Trevor can't challenge the evidence because it comes from his own financial records, surveillance photographs, and testimony from multiple independent witnesses. Patricia Walsh had compiled forensic accounting reports that demonstrated exactly how Trevor's spending patterns exceeded his legitimate income throughout 5 years of employment at the law firm. Her analysis included comparisons with similar embezzlement cases, showing that Trevor's crimes ranked among the most sophisticated elder abuse schemes prosecuted in federal court. The devastating detail here, Patricia noted while highlighting specific transactions, is how methodically he targeted clients with early-stage dementia or limited family support. He specifically chose victims who were least likely to notice missing money or successfully report theft. That revelation eliminated any remaining sympathy I might have felt for Trevor's situation. He wasn't just a gambling addict who'd made desperate choices. He was a calculating predator who deliberately victimized the most vulnerable people in his professional sphere. Dorothy had insisted on attending the retirement party, despite her increasing mobility challenges, declaring that she'd waited 5 years to see Trevor face consequences and wouldn't miss the conclusion of what she called the longest con game in family history. I want to look that boy in the eye when he realizes his lies are finally catching up with him, she said, while Linda helped her select appropriate attire for the confrontation. 91 years on this earth have taught me that justice delayed often becomes justice amplified. Linda had arranged for her daughters to spend the weekend with their grandmother, protecting them from witnessing what promised to be an emotionally intense family confrontation. Her calm strength provided the emotional anchor I needed to focus on execution, rather than the years of accumulated anger that threatened to overwhelm rational planning. Remember that you're not doing this for revenge, she reminded me, while we packed evidence files for transport to the country club. You're doing this to protect other elderly people from being victimized and to clear your name with family members who've believed lies for too long. Marcus Williams had volunteered to coordinate with federal agents, ensuring that Trevor's arrest would occur immediately after public revelation, but before he could flee or destroy additional evidence. His military background proved invaluable for planning logistics that considered multiple contingency scenarios: target acquisition and neutralization. Marcus explained using terminology that reflected his combat experience. We're going to strip away his support system, expose his crimes, and ensure he faces maximum legal consequences in front of everyone who believed his lies. The psychological impact of public exposure would arguably hurt Trevor more than eventual imprisonment. His entire identity was built on maintaining a reputation for integrity and success that commanded respect from family, colleagues, and social peers. Watching that carefully constructed image collapse in real time would devastate his narcissistic personality in ways that prison sentences couldn't match. Amanda Fletcher had agreed to serve as our inside coordinator at the party, providing real-time intelligence about guest attendance seating arrangements and optimal timing for maximum impact. Her family's longtime relationship with our parents gave her natural credibility that would help legitimize our accusations. Trevor's planning to announce his engagement during the dinner's main course, Amanda reported after conversations with party planners. He's arranged for a spotlight moment that's supposed to be the evening's highlight. That timing gives you a perfect opportunity to redirect everyone's attention. Thomas Peterson had prepared character testimony that would help rebuild my reputation with family friends who'd believed Trevor's gambling addiction story. His perspective as an educator who'd known both brothers throughout adolescence carried moral authority that could counteract years of accumulated prejudice. I've taught thousands of students over 37 years, Thomas explained while reviewing his planned remarks. Horace never displayed behavioral patterns associated with addiction, dishonesty, or financial irresponsibility. Trevor, however, consistently demonstrated manipulative tendencies that concerned multiple faculty members. The final piece of preparation involved coordinating media coverage. that would ensure Trevor's crimes received public attention beyond the immediate family circle. Jessica Hartwell's prominent family connections meant that news of fraudulent behavior by her fiancé would generate significant press interest, particularly given the involvement of elderly victims and a prestigious law firm. White-collar crime involving judicial families creates natural news hooks, explained the journalist who'd agreed to cover the story. If your evidence is as comprehensive as described, this becomes a cautionary tale about trust family manipulation and predatory financial behavior. Standing in our hotel room the night before the confrontation, surrounded by evidence that would finally vindicate 5 years of patient investigation, I felt the weight of approaching resolution. Tomorrow evening, Trevor would discover that consequences he'd successfully avoided through manipulation and charm were finally arriving with compound interest. Linda sat beside me on the bed, holding my hand, while we reviewed the final timeline for revelation. Her presence reminded me that life after Trevor's exposure would continue hopefully, including relationships with parents who'd learned to question their assumptions about truth and deception. "Whatever happens tomorrow night," she said while organizing evidence files for easy transport, "we'll face it together. You're not the abandoned 20-year-old who left home with nothing. You're a successful businessman who built something meaningful from ruins Trevor created." The boy who'd been exiled for crimes he didn't commit was gone, replaced by a man who understood that real power comes from patience, preparation, and the courage to confront lies with documented truth. Trevor's reckoning had been 5 years in the making, and every detail was finally ready for execution. Lakewood Country Club buzzed with the energy of celebration as I walked through the main entrance, carrying a leather portfolio that contained enough evidence to destroy Trevor's life forever. The retirement party was exactly the kind of elegant affair our father deserved: crystal chandeliers, casting warm light over tables decorated with white linens and fresh flowers, while guests mingled over cocktails before the formal dinner service. Frank Sterling stood near the bar, accepting congratulations from business partners and longtime employees who'd gathered to honor 38 years of honest work and community leadership. My father looked distinguished in his navy blue suit, his silver hair combed carefully, and his face showing the contentment that comes from a career well lived. Seeing him surrounded by genuine respect and affection reminded me why tonight's revelation needed to focus on justice rather than personal revenge. Margaret spotted me first, her face cycling through surprised confusion and poorly concealed dismay as she processed my unexpected attendance. She'd aged noticeably over 5 years, her auburn hair now completely gray, and her posture suggesting the burden of stress that comes from family dysfunction. When our eyes met across the crowded room, I saw questions she couldn't voice in public. Trevor commanded attention at the room's center, regaling guests with animated stories about his professional success and upcoming wedding plans. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that probably cost more than most attendees earned monthly. His confident gestures and practiced charm working their familiar magic on an audience that included Jessica's prominent family members. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trevor announced, tapping his champagne flute with theatrical precision. "Before we begin dinner service, I have a special announcement that makes this evening even more meaningful." The timing was perfect. I approached the head table as Trevor prepared to deliver his engagement speech, placing my portfolio deliberately on the white tablecloth between the centerpiece and his champagne glass. Every eye in the room followed my movement, conversations dying into curious silence. "Hello, Trevor," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden quiet. "Hello, Mom, Dad." Frank's face showed genuine confusion at my unexpected appearance. Margaret clutched her pearl necklace with familiar dramatic flair, while Trevor's confident expression flickered momentarily before recovering its practiced charm. "Horace?" Trevor exclaimed with manufactured enthusiasm. "What a wonderful surprise, everyone. This is my younger brother. We haven't seen him in far too long." Judge Hartwell, a distinguished man in his 70s, who commanded respect throughout the state's legal community, studied my face with the analytical attention that comes from 4 decades of evaluating witness credibility. Jessica stood beside him, her blonde hair and blue eyes reflecting the patrician beauty that suggested generations of careful breeding and social privilege. "I apologize for interrupting the celebration," I said, addressing the room while keeping my eyes fixed on Trevor's increasingly nervous expression. "But there's something everyone needs to know before this engagement announcement proceeds." Amanda Fletcher moved closer to the head table, providing silent moral support that helped steady my voice. Thomas Peterson stepped forward from his position near the bar, his presence adding educational authority to whatever accusations I was preparing to make. "Trevor, 5 years ago, you stole $43,000 from my college fund and convinced our family I was a gambling addict who'd embezzled money to pay debts." I continued opening the portfolio to reveal organized evidence files. "Tonight, I'm here to present proof that you're the criminal, not me." The room erupted in shocked murmurs as guests processed this unexpected accusation. Trevor's face underwent a remarkable transformation, his practiced charm dissolving into something resembling panic before he forced his features back into concerned brother mode. "Horace, please," Trevor said with patronizing gentleness. "We've discussed your problems before. This isn't the appropriate time or place for another episode." Judge Hartwell's expression sharpened with professional interest. "What kind of proof are you claiming to possess, young man?" I distributed copies of David's investigation to key guests, the judge Frank Margaret, and several business associates whose opinions carried weight in the community. Bank records, surveillance photographs, witness statements, and forensic accounting reports painted a comprehensive picture of systematic theft and manipulation. Trevor has been embezzling money from elderly clients at Hartwell Morrison and Associates for 5 years. I announced, watching his confident facade crumble in real time. He's stolen over $400,000 from retirement accounts belonging to people who trusted him with their financial security. Jessica's face went white as she processed implications that extended far beyond family drama into potential criminal prosecution involving her father's law firm. Judge Hartwell studied the financial documents with growing alarm, his legal training immediately recognizing the significance of evidence that could destroy his family's professional reputation. "These accusations are completely false," Trevor declared, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Horace has been struggling with addiction and mental health issues for years. He's clearly having another breakdown." Helen Morris chose that moment to enter the dining room carrying boxes of additional evidence from Trevor's office that she'd been secretly copying for months. Her timing was perfect, providing corroboration that transformed my accusations from family drama into credible whistleblower testimony. "Mr. Trevor's been shredding client files and moving money between accounts all week," Helen announced, her voice trembling but determined. "I couldn't stay quiet anymore after learning how many elderly people he's been stealing from." The evidence spoke for itself. Surveillance photographs showed Trevor at underground poker games, losing enormous sums that exceeded his legitimate salary by hundreds of %. Forged documents revealed systematic manipulation of client accounts. Witness statements from multiple sources confirmed a pattern of deception that extended far beyond my stolen college fund. Frank's face showed the devastation that comes from learning your child is capable of crimes you'd never imagined. Margaret sobbed openly as she processed evidence that her golden boy son was actually a sophisticated predator who'd built his success on theft and lies. The FBI has been investigating these crimes for months. I continued producing federal documentation that transformed family accusations into official legal proceedings. Trevor will be arrested tomorrow morning on federal embezzlement charges involving elderly victims. Trevor's composure finally shattered completely. Gone was the confident charm that had manipulated family members and colleagues for years, replaced by desperate panic of someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing in public. "You don't understand," Trevor pleaded, looking around the room for sympathetic faces that no longer existed. "I was going to pay everything back. The gambling got out of control, but I never meant to hurt anyone." Jessica removed her engagement ring with deliberate precision, placing it on the table beside my evidence portfolio. "This relationship is over, Trevor. I won't marry someone who preys on vulnerable, elderly people." Judge Hartwell's expression showed the cold fury that comes from learning your family's professional reputation has been compromised by criminal behavior. "Trevor Morrison, you're no longer employed by our firm effective immediately. We'll be cooperating fully with federal authorities to ensure you face maximum prosecution." The room watched in stunned silence as Trevor's perfect life disintegrated in real time. His engagement was broken, his career destroyed, his family relationships shattered, and his freedom forfeited through his own criminal choices. But the confrontation wasn't finished. Frank approached me with tears in his eyes, carrying the weight of 5 years' worth of misplaced accusations and family betrayal. "Son," he said, his voice breaking with emotion I'd never heard before, "can you ever forgive us for believing Trevor's lies instead of trusting your character?" The question hung between us like a bridge, spanning years of pain and misunderstanding. Looking into my father's eyes, I saw genuine remorse that suggested healing might be possible even after devastating family trauma. "We have a lot to discuss, Dad," I replied, feeling Linda's supportive presence beside me. "But tonight is supposed to be about celebrating your retirement. Let's focus on that." As federal agents entered the country club to arrest Trevor on charges that would send him to prison for decades, I realized that justice delivered through patience and preparation felt infinitely more satisfying than immediate revenge could have provided. The truth had finally emerged from beneath years of lies, and my family would never be the same. Trevor's arrest unfolded with the clinical precision of federal law enforcement professionals who'd been planning this moment for months. Special Agent Sarah Martinez read Miranda rights in the country club's main dining room, while 67 guests watched Trevor's golden boy persona crumble into handcuffs and humiliation. "Trevor Morrison, you're under arrest for wire fraud, elder abuse, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes against vulnerable victims." Agent Martinez announced, her voice carrying the authority that comes from prosecuting white-collar criminals who prey on society's most defenseless members. Jessica Hartwell maintained dignified composure despite the devastation of learning her fiancé was a federal criminal. Judge Hartwell's expression showed the cold, professional fury of someone whose family's legal reputation had been compromised by association with systematic fraud. The Hartwell family will pursue civil remedies to recover every stolen dollar and ensure complete restitution for victimized clients, the judge declared while Trevor was led away in federal custody. "Our firm's integrity will not be tainted by one individual's criminal choices." Frank Sterling stood frozen beside the head table, processing the reality that his older son was a sophisticated predator who'd spent years stealing from elderly victims while manipulating family members through carefully crafted lies. Margaret sobbed openly, clutching Dorothy's hand for emotional support that transcended their complicated relationship history. "I need to understand how we missed the signs," Frank said, his voice carrying the bewilderment of a parent whose fundamental assumptions about his children had been shattered. "How did Trevor fool everyone for so long?" Dorothy, 91 years old, but sharper than people half her age, provided the wisdom that comes from observing human nature for 9 decades. "Criminals succeed by telling people what they want to believe, Frank. Trevor learned early that golden boy charm could cover up dark behavior if he was smart about presentation. The federal investigation had uncovered crimes extending far beyond Trevor's theft of my college fund. Agent Martinez explained that Trevor had stolen over $470,000 from 16 elderly clients, many suffering from early-stage dementia or limited family support that made them perfect targets for financial predation. Your brother specifically chose victims who were least likely to detect missing money or successfully report theft, Agent Martinez told me, while federal accountants began asset seizure procedures. This represents one of the most calculated elder abuse schemes we've prosecuted in federal court. Linda's presence provided emotional stability that helped me navigate the complex feelings that came from watching Trevor's arrest. 5 years of patient investigation had culminated in justice, but family relationships damaged by systematic deception would require considerable time and effort to rebuild. "How do you feel seeing Trevor arrested?" Linda asked quietly, while federal agents processed evidence and interviewed witnesses. The question forced me to examine emotions that ranged from satisfaction at seeing justice, served to genuine sadness about family destruction that could have been avoided if Trevor had chosen honesty over manipulation. "I feel relieved that his victims will get restitution, and he'll face consequences proportional to his crimes," I replied, watching Margaret struggle to process evidence of Trevor's systematic fraud. "But I also feel sad about the family relationships his lies destroyed." Marcus Williams arrived at the country club with several employees from Williams Sterling Moving Solutions, providing additional support during what had become an impromptu business celebration, alongside family reconciliation. Our company's success represented tangible proof that Trevor's attempts to destroy my future had ultimately failed. "You built something meaningful from the ruins Trevor created," Marcus observed while we watched federal agents document evidence. "Success achieved through honest work always feels more satisfying than wealth obtained through theft and deception." Robert Chen coordinated with federal prosecutors to ensure Trevor faced maximum penalties under federal sentencing guidelines for elder abuse crimes. The evidence we'd compiled would support conviction on multiple felony charges carrying sentences totaling 27 years in federal prison. "Your brother will serve significant time," Robert explained while reviewing plea bargaining options that federal prosecutors were unlikely to offer. Elder financial abuse crimes involving vulnerable victims receive mandatory minimum sentences that can't be reduced through family connections or legal manipulation. Patricia Walsh's forensic accounting reports had identified specific victims whose retirement savings Trevor had systematically stolen over 5 years of employment at the law firm. Many of these elderly clients faced financial hardship that threatened their ability to afford basic necessities like prescription medications and assisted living care. In Izakhitan, complete restitution will require liquidating Trevor's assets and establishing payment plans that extend beyond his prison sentence. Patricia explained while calculating recovery scenarios. Some victims may never fully recover their stolen retirement funds. That reality transformed my satisfaction at seeing Trevor arrested into genuine concern for innocent people whose lives had been devastated by his criminal choices. Justice required not just punishment for the perpetrator, but meaningful assistance for victims who'd trusted him with their financial security. The retirement party gradually resumed its intended celebration as federal agents completed arrest procedures and guests processed the evening's dramatic revelations. Frank's business associates rallied around him with expressions of support that emphasized Trevor's crimes reflected individual character flaws rather than family dysfunction. 38 years of honest business dealings speak louder than one son's criminal choices, declared William Henderson Frank's longtime construction partner. The Sterling family reputation for integrity remains intact. Amanda Fletcher approached me with tears in her eyes, carrying emotional weight that came from witnessing family reconciliation after years of painful separation. Her friendship had provided crucial support during my exile, and seeing justice finally served felt like vindication for everyone who doubted Trevor's accusations. I always knew you were telling the truth about the gambling addiction story, Amanda said while giving me a hug that conveyed years of accumulated sympathy. Trevor's performance was convincing, but something about his accusations never felt genuine. Thomas Peterson provided character testimony that helped rebuild my reputation with family friends who'd believed Trevor's lies for 5 years. His perspective as an educator who'd known both brothers throughout adolescence carried moral authority that counteracted accumulated prejudice. Horace consistently demonstrated integrity and responsibility that made Trevor's gambling addiction accusations seem completely inconsistent with his established character patterns. Thomas explained while addressing concerned relatives. Professional experience teaching thousands of students develops instincts about honesty that Trevor's stories never satisfied. As the evening concluded with toasts celebrating Frank's retirement and acknowledgement of family healing that would require considerable time to complete, I realized that justice delivered through patience and systematic investigation felt infinitely more satisfying than immediate revenge could have provided. Trevor would spend decades in federal prison learning that consequences for criminal choices can't be avoided indefinitely through charm and manipulation. His victims would receive restitution that restored stolen retirement funds. My family relationships damaged by years of systematic deception would slowly rebuild on foundations of documented truth rather than convenient lies. Linda and I drove away from Lakewood Country Club with Dorothy safely secured in the back seat, heading toward a future that included regular family dinners, grandchildren who would know their great-grandmother's wisdom, and the peace that comes from proving innocence through perseverance rather than anger. Real success isn't measured by financial achievements or professional recognition. I reflected while Linda navigated through evening traffic toward home. Real success comes from maintaining your integrity when facing injustice and building something meaningful from the ruins other people create. The lesson Trevor's betrayal had taught me extended far beyond personal vindication into fundamental truths about character, patience, and the power that comes from choosing construction over destruction when life presents opportunities for both. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, but building something better than what they tried to take away from you. Trevor had stolen my college fund and temporarily destroyed my family relationships, but those losses had motivated me to create a business empire built on honest work, meaningful relationships, and the kind of success that can't be stolen or manipulated away. Justice had been served, truth had been revealed, and family healing could finally begin. The boy who'd been exiled at 20 had returned as a man who understood that some battles are won through patience, preparation, and the courage to confront lies with documented truth. If you've ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely, I'd love to hear how you found the strength to rebuild and move forward. What kept you going during the darkest moments when everything seemed lost? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find hope in their own struggles with family betrayal and injustice. Don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about overcoming adversity through perseverance and determination. And please share this with anyone who might need to hear that justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your current struggles don't define your future success. Sometimes the greatest victories come to those who refuse to give up even when the whole world seems to believe lies instead of truth.